Minority Leader Chuck Schumer having a pretty tough week, especially with the book rollout and everything, getting roughed up in a lot of places. Here's Democrat lawmaker Glenn Ivey at a town hall last night.
I'm afraid that it may be time for the Senate Democrats to pick new leadership as we move forward.
So that got a lot of support from the crowd, but later on, they let the congressman have it over what they see as the complete failure of the Democratic Party to challenge President Trump. Watch this.
We want you to show some of the backbone and strategic brilliance that Mitch McConnell would have in the minority.
Right.
We want you to show fight, and you are not fighting.
Answer his question. I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question. You're not going to get me upset.
The Democrats are descending into utter madness as President Trump continues to completely dismantle D.C. We're going to see how the legacy media is reluctantly but inevitably coming to the conclusion that Donald J. Trump hasn't just taken over the Republican Party, he's redefining the nation like no president has in nearly a century. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing, the Democrats and the political left can do to stop him. Greetings, everyone. It is a live stream Friday. I am your host, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, here to celebrate with you the dawn of the new golden age that you made possible back on November the 5th. So if you want a front row seat on all things happening in the rise of this new civilizationalist age, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. As always, we got a jam-packed show today. It is my pledge to you to try to make you feel smarter by the end of it all as we discover the deeper meaning of what's really happening all around us. Our super chats, of course, are now up, so feel free to send in your questions. I'll be happy to answer them all throughout the live stream. You can also actually send me your questions in two ways, either through a one-time gift via our super chats or by becoming a Courageous Patriot Club member, where your one-time monthly gift will enable you to ask me as many questions as you like, both on a platform here on YouTube, but also off platform. We have our own exclusive virtual platform where we get together every week. So just click on the link below to join. You have instant access to all kinds of exclusive live Q&As and special content. Either way, it'll be my privilege to answer your questions all throughout this live stream. We have never seen anything like this. That is what the legacy media is openly admitting about President Trump. And it's true. We have actually never seen in our lifetimes a presidency quite like this. Case in point, yesterday, President Trump did what every single Republican president since Ronald Reagan in 1980 promised to do, but never delivered on. He abolished the Department of Education. And he did it, as you can see, with one stroke of his pen. Talk about a pen being mightier than the sword. That was it. That was all that was ever needed. Just like closing the border. All the debate during the Biden years, all that deliberation, that dysfunctionality, that back and forth Senate drama, the bipartisan bills in Congress that we were told by the legacy media and our politicians were absolutely necessary for Biden to act to secure the border. He's powerless. He can't do anything without congressional legislation. All of it was nothing more than kabuki theater. It was a lie. It's what's called virtual politics. It wasn't real. Within 48 hours of taking office, President Trump completely secured the border. And now attempted border crossings are their lowest level in decades. Now, this is why I would argue, and increasingly even the legacy media is arguing, this is why Trump has officially become the new permanent standard bearer of the new Patriot GOP, the grand old Patriot Party, as I like to call it. Ronald Reagan is officially taking a backseat to Trump from here on in. Reagan was wonderful in so many ways, but I hate to break it to the National Review types. Trump every day is exposing all of the opportunities that were always there for Reagan to dismantle the administrative state that he squandered. In many ways, Reagan, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., they all completely squandered their opportunity in the Oval Office, an opportunity ironically granted to them by the Constitution. Keep in mind, George W. Bush actually doubled the size of the Department of Education with No Child Left Behind. Why did it take 40 years to abolish an abomination to education if all it took was simply the stroke of a presidential pen? I mean, you all know the Department of Education always was a leftist institution from its very inception. It was established back in 1979 by Jimmy Carter as a gift, dare I say it, as a bribe to the teachers' unions to support him over Ted Kennedy, who was challenging him in the Democrat presidential primary that year. It was from its very inception a left-wing liberal institution. It was a leftist institution given by a leftist to leftists, but not just ideologically. No, it's worse than that. We now know that the Department of Education ultimately was actually nothing more than a money laundering operation. It was a slush fund created by leftists for leftists, giving left-wing activists and causes tens of millions of dollars. Here's a fun fact, but you may want to take your blood pressure medicine before you hear it. Since 1979, the Department of Education has raked in, get this, over $3 trillion. $3 trillion. And have test scores and aptitudes gone up? No, they've either flatlined or they plummeted. As school administrators got richer and more plentiful, students got dumber. As President Trump has repeatedly underscored, the department has overseen one of the most dramatic declines in test scores and academic standards ever witnessed in our nation's history. And yet its annual budget increased every single year. And this is so key as to why it's being abolished. The Department of Education has demonstrably done nothing, literally nothing, to improve education. Quite the contrary. The Education Department has been a net negative, actually contributing to the demise of educational standards. All the while, we're pouring $3 trillion with a T, dollars into it. Not to mention that the Constitution gives the federal government absolutely no role whatsoever in education. So the Department of Education has been a net negative. It's only actually contributed to our school system's demise. It's only actually made that demise worse. And besides that, it's only enriched bureaucrats. It's a slush fund for Democrat activists and causes. And now it's officially buried. It's been abolished. And all it took was a simple stroke of the president's pen. That's it. And so this is the reason why more and more commentators are recognizing that Trump is, without equal, the new standard bearer of the new Republican Party. It's because he, unlike any of his predecessors, literally over the last century, he has restored to our nation a real constitutional presidency. You've got to get that. If you want to understand what's really happening in our nation today, this is it. For the first time in our lives, we are watching a president actually exercise his constitutionally granted executive authority to its fullest without the unconstitutional restraints of unelected bureaucrats impeding his power. We'll get to these rogue activist judges in a moment. Don't worry. We'll deal with them. But suffice it to say, the precise reason why we're seeing an unprecedented amount of judicial injunctions leveled at Trump, the likes of which we have never seen historically, is precisely because he's actually doing the job the Constitution expects the president to do. The Constitution actually grants the president extraordinary executive power in the form of executive orders. But of course, those orders are limited to the term the president serves in office. They can be just as easily reversed by the next president. But those powers are real while he sits in office. The president has extraordinary power to move the country very quickly, very rapidly, at neck-breaking speed in a particular direction. We saw this in its opposite form with bumbling Biden and his freaking auto pen. He effectively dismantled border security at breathtaking speed. He undid virtually everything Trump had done in his first 4 years within days of taking office. And then, of course, after breaking the country, Biden just basically left it at that. He spent the rest of his presidency taking naps on a Delaware beach. I know. I lived 20 minutes away from the guy, and they would shut down streets almost every single weekend because he came home to nap. Trump, by contrast, is reawakening the true executive power of the office as the defining hallmark of his presidency. His second term, he's already signed more executive orders than any previous president in their first 100 days ever. And he is radically remaking the federal government like never before in the process. So then what's Congress's role in all of this? If the president has this extraordinary power in his term, what's Congress's role? Well, simply put, if they want to make the president's executive orders permanent, they have to pass legislation codifying those orders into federal law. That's what the president's party is responsible for doing, while the opposition party seeks to limit the president's power by denying that permanent codification. That's the balance of powers. That's why we have midterms. That's why we have that swinging pendulum. You get this massive amount of power concentrated in the executive branch during a presidential year election. And then you have a chance in a mere 18 months to swing against that if you don't like where the president is taking the country. But up until this point, every single Republican and Democrat president, for the exception, or maybe I should say since FDR, who was really the last president to actually use his constitutionally mandated executive power, every single president has been hampered by the rise of the very administrative state and deep state that FDR put into place. And that administrative and deep state, that those unelected bureaucrats have tempered that executive power with the directives of an unelected bureaucracy. This is what made the raid on Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago so patently absurd. He was being raided for having classified documents in his home when he, as the chief executive, has ultimate decision-making authority on classification. It was a contradiction in terms. But the legacy media, because they hate him and because they hate you, the legacy media went along with that charade. That CIA operatives, that NSA bureaucrats, no, they're the ones who actually have the ultimate classification authority. Oh, and by the way, you can't vote for them. They're unelected. But we're the defenders of democracy. Every single day, literally every single hour of every single day, Trump is taking that authority back. The reason why Trump is the new standard bearer of the party is because he is the first president in our lifetimes to govern in accordance with his constitutionally mandated executive power. And he's demonstrating what this country is capable of when we follow the powers granted by the Constitution, when we dismantle by executive order the administrative and deep state, when we tell activist judges to go shove it until the Supreme Court makes its decision, when the president's party in power enacts his vision through legislation to make his executive orders permanent. This is how the United States of America is constitutionally supposed to be governed. And it's glorious. It's the wonder of the world. And that's why 80% of the country that supports all the measures that Trump is doing, from border security to economic security to reversing wokeness and the like, this is why they're so happy with him. It is absolutely glorious. But for the Democrats and the pathetic fringe 20% of our country who actually want wide open borders and illegal immigration gang members to walk our streets and unimpeded, and men competing in women's sports, for that 20%, miserable 20%, what Trump is doing is beyond anything they can actually comprehend. They never imagined this. They knew he was going to be bad, but they just expected, like a George W. Bush on steroids or something like that, or Trump's first term, where he's constantly hampered by investigations and by Paul, Eddie Munster, Ryan, and all that. They were expecting maybe a little bit better than that. They weren't expecting anything like this. Trump is literally destroying the federal system that the woke left spent the last 8 decades building. And as a result, the woke left is literally descending into madness. Wait until you see this. But first, gang, we're all about standing up for the timeless values of faith, family, and freedom. So that's why I partnered with Patriot Mobile, because they're on the front lines fighting for the First and Second Amendments, the sanctity of life, and our military and first responder heroes. And I urge you to take up the fight, take a stand for conservative causes, and put America first by switching to Patriot Mobile today. Now, you'll get the same nationwide coverage as the big providers, because Patriot Mobile operates across all 3 major networks, so there's no change there. Plus, they back their service with a coverage guarantee. Their 100% US-based customer service team will find the best plan for your needs. Keep your number, keep your phone, or you can upgrade, whatever you like. Go to patriotmobile.com/TurleyTalks or give them a call at 972-PATRIOT. That's 972-PATRIOT. Right now, they're giving a free month when you use the offer code Turley Talks. It's all one word, Turley Talks, like Ted Cox, but with Turley in there. So don't get fooled by other providers pretending to share your values or have the same coverage. They don't, and they can't. Join me. Switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, Patriot Mobile, today.
President define a bad judge? Is it just someone who disagrees with him? And is that a dangerous precedent in this case, because this is a temporary ruling from Judge Boasberg that he could ultimately rule in your favor? Is he setting up a standard here for calling for the impeachment of a judge who may ultimately rule on your side?
No, it has nothing to do with disagreeing with the president on policy. It's with disagreeing with the Constitution and the law. And it's trying to usurp the authority of the executive branch of this country. It's having baseless reasoning for these injunctions, and it's a clear effort by these judges to slow roll this president's agenda. And if you just look at the injunctions that this president has faced, deporting foreign terrorists from our homeland, hiring and firing of executive branch employees, which when the president is the executive of the executive branch. You also see an injunction by a partisan activist judge when it comes to the Secretary of Defense trying to determine the readiness of our troops and the qualifications of our troops in our armed forces. Does a single district court judge really have more authority over the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense to determine who should serve in our United States Armed Forces? Absolutely not. Anyone who has taken a basic civics lesson can understand that, and it's ridiculous lawfare that we are witnessing.
Hear, hear. That, of course, is the new standard bearer for White House press secretaries, Caroline Levick. Talk about an upgrade from what we had. from Notebook Lady. What do they call her? Jesse Waters calls her. I think they call her Notebook Lady or something like that. I mean, Caroline Leavitt, amazing. Bringing the heat as she always does against the continuation of judicial activist lawfare. Now, in the wake of President Trump restoring constitutional rule, the Democrats are finding out to their horror that they are completely and totally powerless. They've been completely locked out of power. They've lost the executive branch. They've lost the legislative branch. They've lost the judicial branch. Hello, overturning Roe v. Wade, right? Hello, restoring presidential immunity. They lost the Senate. They lost the House. They lost the majority of governorships. They lost the majority of state legislatures. They have been locked out of power. So, with that startling realization finally kind of coming to them, they're turning to what appears in the end to really be their only two available options: judicial tyranny and domestic terrorism, or what some are calling Demestic terrorism. How do you like that? I like that little twist of phrase. Demestic terrorism. They're turning to activist judges, left-wing lunatics in a robe, and they're turning to left-wing activist groups who sponsor domestic acts of violence. So let's start with the first one, right? So you got tyrants and you got terrorists. Those are their only two options. As you know, with the tyrants, there have been of late a slew of these tiny, pathetic, inconsequential, judicial, tyrannical wannabes who are trying to disrupt this constitutional separation of powers by inserting themselves in the legitimate exercise of executive power. What you have got to get, because I get questions about this all the time, if you take a stand back, and even though I'm going to show you even the legacy media is admitting this, what you have got to get is that apart from simply slowing down the process of dismantling the administrative state, they can't stop it. They're actually not accomplishing a damn thing. This is what you have got to get. Even leftists are admitting this. Case in point, the New York Times has a whole piece out on how the Trump administration is completely defying these judges. Like what he did with the freak show of a judge who's, who tried to, by the way, this freak show judge, what's his name? Bossberg. I mean, his family is steeped in far left organizations, but regardless, just Judge Boasberg, this is the guy who ordered, that's what this question was about at the White House press conference there. This is what the guy who ordered the planes with the illegal alien criminal gang members on it to turn around mid-flight and bring them back to the United States. He actually thinks he has that kind of power. And the Trump administration, like Bane in the Batman episode, kind of put his hand on his shoulder and say, do you look like you're in control here? And the Trump administration told him to literally shove it. They blatantly told this judge to stick his orders where the sun don't shine. By the way, Pam Bondi of the Justice Department is doing the same thing. That's been the pattern. The pattern is the Trump administration is basically approaching these rulings as gnats, as mosquitoes, not as roadblocks. Trump has indeed confirmed the White House's position. He just wrote, I believe it just came out today, no district court judge or any judge, notice that singular term, no judge can assume the duties of the President of the United States. One only crime and chaos would result, make America great again. He's just not playing along with us. And as the New York Times laments, the Trump administration is largely blowing these court decisions off until the Supreme Court renders its verdict, which will most likely reverse all of them later this summer. But he's also doing something else in the meantime. We talked about this week. Trump is playing a little bit of awesome 4D chess with these rulings. So when a left-wing activist disguised as a judge rules that Trump has to, say, reinstate 10,000 positions that they had cut from a department. This is really neat. Not only can Trump put up all kinds of bureaucratic barriers. Oh, sure, we'll be happy to do that. Well, after you fill out this form, after you fill out this form, after you fill out this form. And then, of course, well, since we got rid of those jobs, we're going to have to reestablish them. And, well, we need access. You have to give them access to their computers. Oh, yeah, the computer. That's right. Oh, boy, they got locked up. So did we. This is going to take a while. So they can stonewall the judge's decisions indefinitely. And to make it even worse for these judges, there's nothing in the ruling that requires Trump reinstate the same people who were there before, the same federal employees who were let go. In fact, the more the Trump administration stonewalls, the more they appeal these rulings, the longer they stretch out the time that all but guarantees that these former federal employees just end up going and finding other jobs. So, because Trump does not have to rehire these employees that this whatever activist judge in their ruling requiring the positions to be reinstated, Trump has the power and the freedom to appoint whoever he wants to those reinstated positions. And ironically, I mean, if you want to talk about karma being a bitch, ironically, that is exactly the Project 2025 blueprint. This is exactly what Project 2025 predicted and advocated. Get rid of all these Democrat federal employees that vote 98% Democrat in every election. Get rid of them all. And then when a judge orders you, oh, no, you have to restore those positions, no problem. Replace them all with MAGA loyalists. So Trump is playing some 4D chess here with these judges. That's the other side of it that, of course, the legacy media never reports on. A few of them are lamenting and freaking out that Trump is doing this. I read an article the other night from Salon.com. That's what they're flipping out over. They have a number of articles on Salon where showing how Trump and Musk are actually replacing federal employees with MAGA loyalists to the tune of thousands. So Trump is playing both sides of the game in all of this. And at the same time, in terms of those positions and departments they want permanently gone, the Justice Department is preparing arguments that are far and away superior to the incredibly forced reasonings behind these blatant judicial overreaches. So this is what you got to get. I know it's frustrating with all these judges popping up saying, no. I know. But that's only because Trump is restoring actually constitutional order, ironically. But this is what you got to get. And remind yourself, in the end, either way, we win. And Trump is playing both sides of it. Either way, we win. You got to get that. Either way. So if we have to reinstate all these positions that were previously eliminated, no problem. That just gives us the opportunity to implement the Project 2025 blueprint and replace them with MAGA loyalists. Leftist outlets are admitting that is what is happening. Or we just ignore all this nonsense until the Supreme Court nullifies all of these lower court injunctions later this summer. Either way, we win. That's how politics is played, gang. The left has no power, period. And so that's why the left is increasingly turning to their second option, which is, we all know it. It's what they do best. It's burning, it's destroying, it's looting. It's what they do best. But again, it's only ultimately burning and destroying them. Wait until you see this. But first, gang, President Trump has just signed an executive order outlining his plans to create America's first national sovereign wealth fund. And it's going to need to be filled up with assets fast. Trump wants to go live with this plan in the next 90 days. The Wall Street types are already focusing on packing it with real estate, infrastructure, pieces of trendy companies like TikTok. But let's not forget about gold. sovereign wealth funds all over the world love to buy gold, and in bulk. Australia has been loading up. Saudi Arabia is buying the world's largest gold mine as we speak to supply itself, and even tiny Singapore. They recently added more than 100 metric tons of gold to their vaults. Can you imagine what could happen to the per ounce price of gold, which has already been surging sky high since Trump took office, if America's new sovereign wealth fund followed international best practices and made gold a part of its diversified portfolio? I mean, it would potentially make our country a brand new megabyter in an already tight market. And when there's limited supply and huge demand, the impact on prices, well, let's just say you want to be ready. You want to get in the game. And there's a simple way to do that. It's all laid out for you in the free gold report from my partners at turleytalkslikesgold.com. You want to request your copy right away. Do not wait. After all, President Trump has put the world on notice. A new sovereign wealth fund for America may be coming, perhaps as little as the next 90 days. So take advantage of the time you have to prepare. Get your free gold report now at turleytalkslikesgold.com.
Because she was driving a Tesla.
I was thankfully by myself.
Lee was on the way to a doctor's appointment in Linwood Wednesday morning when she says all of a sudden a driver behind her just laid on the horn as they came up to a red light. Things spiraled out of control when a white SUV followed her and cut her off, stopping in the middle of the road.
Gets out and walks straight up to my window. So I cracked my window and I said, what is the problem? And he goes, you need to sell your car. This is a Nazi car. You're driving it. You need to sell your car.
Lee says she's been driving a Tesla for the last 2 years. She says a man wearing a camouflage jacket and a ski mask attacked her for it.
It's really sad, that this is what's happening to people who honestly, it doesn't affect how I believe or what I believe. It's just the car I drive. Being in Seattle, climate's important, our footprint's important. This seemed like the right move for our very busy family.
This, however, isn't the first incident or act of vandalism reported. We've seen attack after attack after attack. Teslas set ablaze at the Las Vegas Service Center earlier this week, with the culprit leaving behind the word resist. In Oregon, shots were fired at a dealership, and in Massachusetts, charging stations were torched. These incidents have only intensified since CEO Elon Musk has taken a prominent role in the Trump administration while slashing government jobs and spending.
And these are obviously not the brightest bulbs in the box. Obviously, the guy doesn't even realize his license plate is right there for everybody to see. Idiot. So tyranny and terrorism, they're the only two options Democrats now have. Now that Trump has restored constitutional order, and both are boomeranging on them big time. We saw how the judicial tyrants are failing. They're actually playing right into the hands of the Project 2025 blueprint. But now it's the terrorists' turn. Here's Attorney General Pam Bondi announcing a number of arrests that have been made with the Tesla terrorists.
People were locking up on that. We have someone in jail right now from one of the dealerships. They threw a Molotov cocktail through a dealership. They're looking at up to 20 years in prison. So if you're going to touch a Tesla, go to a dealership, do anything, you better watch out because we're coming after you.
Wow.
And
Well,
if you're funding this, we're coming after you. We're going to find out who you are.
So, I mean.
And that's key. Sorry, forgive me. And that's key. They're not just going after the terrorists. They're going after those who are actually funding it as well. They are treating them as domestic terrorists. Trump issued his own rather ominous warning to the lunatic left, who are increasingly turning to this domestic terrorism. He took to Truth Social and wrote, quote, I look forward to watching the sick terrorist thugs get 20-year jail sentences for what they're doing to Elon Musk and Tesla. Perhaps they could serve them in the prisons of El Salvador. Which have become so recently famous for such lovely conditions. That's right. President Trump is threatening to send these left-wing terrorists to the super prison, the mega prison in El Salvador, from the one and only Nayib Bukele, president who got 85% of the vote in his re-election. Absolutely love it. Scott Adams pointed out the ironic futility of it all. You just saw it there in that earlier earlier news post there from I think that was a Fox affiliate in Washington. I don't think Democrats can recover from backing domestic terror against Tesla assets when about 30 to 40% of Tesla owners are Democrats. It's the dumbest play in politics probably in my lifetime. And you just saw it from that lady. She says, I bought Tesla because I love the environment. I can guarantee you she didn't vote for Bush. She didn't vote for Romney. She didn't vote for McCain. I can guarantee you that. I mean, it's so true that there was a time that owning a Tesla was a badge of honor among the left. I mean, let this hit you. This is what I mean. They're the fringe 20%. Owning a Tesla was actually a symbol of your solidarity with the environment. Again, as that lady just told us, it was a symbol of your support for the green movement. But now that this fringe woke left have decreed it so that Tesla is now a symbol of Nazi fascism and a legitimate object of scorn and sabotage, now they're even going after their own leftist voters. You can't make this stuff up. You know, it reminds me of the whole George Floyd hysterics when all these rioters went out and started burning down their own cities, right? They started torching which neighborhoods, right? Their own. They started torching their own neighborhood, their own landmarks, their own businesses, their own buildings. What was so utterly bizarre in the more than $2 billion worth of damage inflicted by the George Floyd riots was that all that damage only ended up getting inflicted on the very people that these rioters were supposedly protesting on behalf of. I mean, let that insanity hit you. Talk about a square circle. The only people who ultimately ended up getting hurt by the George Floyd riots were the very people those riots were supposedly protesting on behalf of. Blacks, minorities, Black lives, Black-owned businesses, all toward Black-owned cars parked in the streets, getting destroyed, flipped over, Black neighborhoods demolished. It was their stores, their franchises, their neighborhoods that were the ones that got looted and destroyed and set ablaze and vandalized and burned by these riots. Beverly Hills was just fine. All the affluent neighborhoods in the nation were left untouched. And so the irony here is what we're seeing with Teslas and George Floyd riots and the like is that the new cultural Marxist left, these cultural Marxist sentiments seem to inevitably lead to a kind of mass self-immolation. Now, scholars have long noted that self-immolation, you know what I'm talking about, like, right, like publicly burning yourself, like the Buddhist monk protests during Vietnam, for example, or going on a hunger strike. The act of publicly harming or even killing yourself for political or religious reasons, a kamikaze mission, as it were. Scholars have recognized that self-immolation is the single most extreme form of protest. Self-immolation, a public act of self-harm, self-destruction, is widely considered the most extreme form of protest. And that, I would argue, is what these Dem-estic terrorists are doing. They are ultimately, ironically, destroying themselves. They are disproportionately targeting their own voters. Just like with the whole George Floyd thing, they're destroying the very businesses and communities and causes that these activists claim to want to help. These are the very same people who told us harming the environment was apocalyptic. Driving a gas-guzzling SUV was a biohazard. It was literally killing the planet. And now what are they doing? Now what are they doing? They're burning the very cars that were made, that were designed, that were manufactured to address those very apocalyptic environmental concerns. And what do they do? Is that helping the environment? Burning rubber? Is that helping the environment? Burning batteries? And this self-immolation, this literal self-destruction, I would argue, is the logical extension of the core of leftism. Again, we've talked about this several times on this channel. We talked about the Brazilian political philosopher Olavo de Carvalho, who I had the honor of interviewing before he passed away. He spent his entire adult life studying leftists. Absolutely fascinating figure, as well as the Polish psychologist Andrzej Lobachevsky and his concept of ponerology. They both concluded, one as a philosopher, the other one as a psychologist, they both concluded that in the end, the core of left-wing movements are ultimately dominated by psychopaths, people who are neurologically inclined to malevolently manipulate and deceive and coerce. Those people appear to be drawn to political movements that allow them to scale that malevolence en masse. And right now, that happens to be far left movements. And when psychopaths command a sizable enough audience, like our modern day Democrat Party, their manipulative tactics intentionally whip up their constituents into a delirious frenzy, like what we're seeing with these Demistic terrorists, so that when your politics are overrun by psychopaths, your constituents end up simply becoming hysterical. That I would argue that's the dynamic that we're seeing operative here. Again, it isn't all Democrats. Let me stress that. Obviously, I would assume that woman we saw in that report there voted Democrat. She's living in a very deep blue state. She's in Seattle. You know, she loves the environment. She's driving a Tesla. She's a Democrat. But this nut, whose license plate was exposed for all to see, idiot, but this nut decides to flip out at her because he's part of this psychopathic hysteria that's whipped up when you have psychopaths overrunning the core of your political movement, right? It's not all Democrats. It's their core. Again, this is what Olavo de Carvalho and Andrzej Lobachevsky concluded. The core right now of leftist movements, it could have been rightist movements in the day, but right now it's leftist movements. The core are overrun. They're dominated by psychopaths. And psychopaths whip up the masses that follow them into a frenzied hysteria. And I would argue that's precisely what TDS is. If you want to understand what TDS is, there you are. There it is. Trump derangement syndrome and Tesla derangement syndrome. The key to understanding TDS is that this is precisely the kind of mass hysteria that is provoked intentionally, whipped up by the manipulating deceptions of unhinged psychopaths, because that's what they get off on. They love doing this. That's why no Democrat leader has denounced any of this Demistic terrorism. We see it. Far left leaders, virtually every panelist on CNN and MSNBC, you could see it in their eyes. They're psychopaths. So what this means is that the political left actually appears to be melting down right in front of our very eyes by reason of its own inherent insanity that pervades its political core. And if that's the case, we may indeed be seeing not just the end of the Democrat Party, but the end of modern political leftism itself. Again, the irony in all of this is ultimately what they're doing is they are turning the vast majority of the nation, including Democrats, against them, right? Simply Democrats who still of sound mind and body. All of this Demistic terror is causing more and more of the country to dismiss the Democrats as outright lunatics. We've called it, understanding it from another frame, we've called this the 80-20 doom loop, right? We've talked a lot about that over the last few weeks. The 80-20 doom loop, certainly since Trump's address to the nation, when CBS found that the address got 80% support. By planting their flag solidly on the side of the 20%, the Democrats end up politically alienating themselves from the vast majority of the nation. Right? We another way of putting it is, what the Democrats are doing is, because they planted their flag with the 20%, they are now desperately trying to politicize the pre-political. They're trying to partizanize. They're trying to turn into a political battle issues that the vast majority of the nation supports, regardless of their political affiliation. There, for example, there is, as we speak, virtually universal support among voters to get rid from the federal government, to get rid of as much waste, fraud, and abuse as possible. There's literally almost 100%. The only people who don't support are those who are profiting off of the waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay, the 10%, the 15%, 20% of the federal workforce. Virtually everyone who's not working for the federal government, probably half the people who do work for the federal government, support getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And that support precedes, it transcends anyone's particular political affiliation. So that's what I mean by it being pre-political, or you might call it trans-political. You don't have to be a partisan to be against waste, fraud, and abuse. It's just a common sense thing. That's why Trump's coalition is increasingly being called the common sense consensus. The exact same thing goes with illegal aliens who are criminal gang members. This judge, this Bozeman guy, is getting no support whatsoever. The same thing goes with securing our borders or keeping trans athletes out of women's sports. 80% of the freaking electorate supports these issues, regardless of their political affiliation. So what that means is that you cannot politicize these issues that have overwhelming support, regardless of one's politics. You can't do it. You can't say, oh, no, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is the opposite. We want to open up our borders. We want these illegal migrant gang members roaming our streets. We want men smashing women's heads in female boxing. That's what we want. No, you can't. You can't politicize pre-political issues. It's the common sense consensus. To go against it means what? It's not hard. You don't have to be a genius to figure it. You don't have to be a political strategist to figure this out. It's not hard. If you are seeing the emergence of a common sense consensus, then what does it say about you if you're trying to politically defeat that? Trying to politically defeat a common sense consensus only ends up making you appear increasingly devoid of any common sense. So that's why the Democrats are increasingly being seen by the majority of the nation, even many Democrats, as lunatic and fringe. It's the 80-20 doom loop. It's because by planting their flag with the fringe 20% that I guess psychopaths found were the most easily manipulated, they end up trying to politicize issues that have overwhelming support regardless of one's politics. And when that politicization involves protest, those protests are fueled by a radical fringe who then turn out to be psychopaths. And so the protests get progressively extreme and hysterical and inevitably result in the ultimate form of extreme protest, which is self-immolation, self-destruction, literally destroying oneself and the causes one believes in as the ultimate form of protest, which only ends up turning more voters away from the Democrats. That is the 80-20 doom loop they're finding themselves in right now. So I know a lot of this can be frustrating. I know. But keep your eye on the prize. So keep your eye on the big picture. That's what we always try to do on this channel. We always want you to understand the big picture of what's happening so you can see where all of this is going. Every hour of every day, President Trump is restoring constitutional rule in our nation. He is the first president in our lifetimes to actually realize the extraordinary power the Constitution grants to the executive branch. And in the process, the lunatic left is descending into utter madness, a madness that will only ultimately result in their own permanent demise. Over to you, gang. Over to you as Josh and Micah assemble your questions. You know, it's more important than ever for all of us to reclaim our privacy. And you have no better way of protecting yourself than with SLNT. That is short for silent. Silent's Faraday products block all incoming and outgoing signals, so no one can get their hands on your information, from key FOBs to phones and laptops. Simply place your device inside, close the sleeve, and voila, that's it. You're actually off the grid and safeguarded from unauthorized access. It's amazing. Go silent today by clicking on that link below or going to slnt.com/Turley to save 15% off plus free shipping on all qualifying orders. Stay ahead of what's coming and secure your privacy today. Again, that's slnt.com/Turley for 15% off and free shipping on all qualified orders. slnt.com/Turley. All right, boys, what do we got? Give me some questions here. Robo Guy, thank you, sir, for the gift. All right, what do we got? I'm worried about the Supreme Court. I know you said how they ruled before, but I'm worried Roberts and Barrett may rule in favor of the rogue judges. How can we be sure they won't backstab us? Well, we can't, okay, Robo Guy, we can't. All I can do is judge them based on their previous decisions. That's what Supreme Court observers do. Also, we can judge them based on when the prosecution and defense, basically, when they go in to argue their cases before the Supreme Court. So they've already made their decision. They've already studied the issue. This is just a formality. So you can tell by the questions that they're asking. For example, we knew Trump was going to be granted executive immunity. We knew that months before the decision was actually made. We knew Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. We knew that months before the decision was made, just by the questions that they're asking. So the questions that are going to start, I mean, that's going to be the big thing. But the questions thus far that have been asked regarding executive power and judicial overreach, and already, I mean, we've got the four conservatives, like you said. I don't think you have to worry about Amy Coney Barrett at this point, or even Justice Roberts. I actually don't. If anything, I think the pushback we got from Justice Roberts was sort of the counterweight to how he's ultimately going to decide, which will be on behalf of Trump. Now, if they vote against them, remember the other side of the equation. If they vote against Trump, then it's Project 2025. Project 2025 wasn't so much about dismantling government, but replacing it. It was literally like a root canal. You're not pulling the tooth. You're hollowing it out. You're getting rid of all the previous federal employees, and then you're stuffing it. You're literally mounting it with MAGA loyalists who would be vetted as MAGA loyalists. So either way it works out in our favor. I think you have to remember that. But in the end, Trump is going to get even with the court injunctions, Trump is going to get the vast majority of what he wants because he has the executive power. There's no way they can stop it. Mark of the Roses. Hi, Dr. Steve. Exciting news on the child education front. Yay. Would you give us quick overall pros, cons, comparing different approaches to schooling, public, charter, home, and private schools, and any other significant schooling option out there I may have forgotten? Well, the only one I would talk about is cyber education, because education is increasingly going online. It's increasingly, we are moving increasingly in a digital revolution, a cyber civilization. We're seeing it obviously with crypto. We're seeing it with AI. We're seeing it with quantum computing. So the world is becoming more and more cyberized. So education is going to be affected that way as well. I mean, just very quickly, I was part of the classical school movement for 20 years. I'm still very close to it. As you know, we have some of the movers and shakers of classical education in the country on. And one of those, by the way, is Pete Hegseth. I never had him on, but he wrote a book on classical education. And this is about returning to the kind of education that all of our founding fathers had. Classical education is a civilizationalist education, where the student is taught the eternal values of truth, goodness, and beauty through the great books, through theology, through beautiful art and music and architecture and so on, and mathematics and science. That's part of what's known as the quadrivium. Very, very important in terms of understanding space and time. So as to literally reconfigure the whole of the cosmos into a cosmic piety expression, the whole of the cosmos towards God. And it tends to be, of course, very Christian in Christ. So that's my take. That comes in two forms. That comes in both private education, classroom education, and homeschooling. Both have their advantages. Homeschooling is wonderful because education is ultimately in the hands of the parents. But it can also be very hard and very difficult. And so you can have a sort of division of labor there, where other like-minded people who are more experts in their field. I know we hate that term, but if you have a hard time teaching physics to your kids, well, I know a fellow who was a physics major and who's a hardcore MAGA loyalist lover, is a Christian and so forth. I'd rather have my kids studying under him than under me. And so that's where the classroom comes in. Charter schools they're great. The problem is, I do believe inevitably you do have a worldview that you have to teach, a worldview that's going to come through by the very means of teaching. And charter schools can be sort of a mixed bag on that. They could still be very secular. They can have mission statements of, we want to create global citizens. No, I don't want a global citizen. I want a faithful citizen. That's what I want. I want a faithful citizen. I want a citizen who's going to make America great again. And so this is where our own culture, our own customs, our own religious traditions become very, very important. Or at the very least, I would like to see them saying, we want to make lovers of Western civilization or something. Okay, good. Then if that's what the charter school is doing, great. Yeah. But it's a little harder in that they right now, at least, they have to quell, say, the overt chapel or prayer element to that. And then public schooling, again, for local public schools are very diverse. I went to what I consider to be a wonderful public school, but I was in a small little town in Orange, Connecticut. We learned all about, and it was at a time where we're learning about all our founding fathers. When I was a kid, I sang the second verse of the Star Spangled Banner, right? Which is basically a prayer. We would sing the first verse and the second verse, right? We had the moment of silence that our teachers told us we were supposed to pray during, pray in our own hearts during. We had a if you had asked me, what does it mean to be American? I would have told you at 7 years old, it was to follow in the footsteps of George Washington and Nathan Hale and Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and John. That's what it meant to be an American. The education was incredibly nationalist and historically rich. That's all gone. And I believe, as I understand it from that school curriculum, it's gone. And now it's woke. And so public schools have to have this woke demon exorcised from their halls before I think anybody outside of special needs kids and so forth, before anybody gives them the time of day. So there you go. That's a nice little summary there. Michael. Dr. Steve, we have a victory on the main fight today. The New York, is it the New York Supreme Court of, New York's Court of Appeals struck down New York City's draconian election law, giving non-citizens the right to vote in a 6-1 decision. I saw that with support from even liberal judges. This is a sign of change, even in leftist bastions like New York City. It could be, Michael. It was such an blatantly unconstitutional. Non-citizens cannot vote. Non-citizens have no right to vote. And as I understand, in any city charter, in any constitution, you would have to change, like they did in San Francisco. You'd have to change the city charter. You'd have to, and then that city charter change can end up conflicting with state, and that's, I think, what happened in New York. So yeah, I don't think judicial. The judicial left has gone lunatic quite yet. Some have. The Supreme Court in Colorado were a bunch of left-wing loons. What was it now? 3-2? I think it was 3-2, 5-4 decision. I forget how many judges they have. But those were left-wing loons. Those were nuts. I mean, even when the Supreme Court comes out 9-0 and says, you guys are nuts, that tells you that some lunacy does break through in the judiciary. But I was very, very excited to see that. Yeah, I do think it's a sign that there is some sanity returning. The common sense consensus is overwhelming. And you'll notice wokeness, DEI, and so forth looks so pathetic and ridiculous. The new Snow White is a disaster. I mean, nobody wants anything to do with this nonsense anymore. So it's impressive. Something is happening through our various cultural institutions, that's for sure. Thank you, Michael. ROT Cold Dr. Turley Jimmy Dore posted videos going on a full-fledged rant yesterday about Trump bombing Yemen and letting Israel end the ceasefire. I thought he made some good points about Trump running on ending the wars, but is right now bombing Yemen, just like Obama and Biden. I saw it. How much of a good point do you think Jimmy Dore is making? Should we as MAGA be calling it out? I can post the links to his videos if you, the Turley Talks Army, are interested. Yeah, I mean, I saw it as well. And yeah, here, the best part for me with this is to just be descriptive rather than prescriptive. Okay. Trump ran on ending U.S. military intervention. Yemen has been blockading our access, as you talk about, to Red Sea and a number of other Israel's access to the Red Sea and so forth. And so this is the Houthis. And so Trump bombed them in retaliation. That is obviously going to provoke a very legitimate criticism from those who supported his pledge not to get militarily involved around the world. We're not to be interventionists anymore. And what is bombing Yemen for no other reason other than gaining access to the Red Sea and so forth, other than intervention, particularly on behalf of Israel. Also, yeah, well, the Israel-Gaza thing is complicated. It's dang complicated because it's just, there's no solution outside of just radically remaking Gaza or eradicating Israel. And which one's more likely to happen? I don't know. Right. I mean, I would say remaking Gaza would probably be the most likely, but there's just no, the world, 90% of the world wants a two-state solution. The problem is, in order to have a two-state solution, both states have to agree to that. One state says no. What are you going to do? Seriously, what are you going to do? We could sanction good luck. Right. That's not going to work. The political realities, that's just simply not going to work. So what do? One state, Israel, says, no way, there's not going to be a two-state solution. So now what? So Gaza stays under Israel. There's no way around that. Now what? How do you work that in? And then Trump's plan was to address both the infrastructure problem that Gaza's been bombed to hell and the ideology problem, and that the Palestinians are turning to Hamas, which wants to eradicate Israel. So what do? Well, you remake Gaza into Dubai. You do your best to remake it in Dubai, make it an international city, as it were, what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East. And that way you solve the infrastructure problem and you solve the ideology problem. And the ideology gets diluted with all this international investment and jobs and prosperity and so forth. Is it possible? Can it happen? I don't know. So I give them a little bit of leave on a leeway, as it were, on Gaza. I mean, that's just insane. I don't know if there's any good solution. But I'm with you on Yemen. To be honest, I mean, again, it's just from a descriptive perspective, he is leaving himself very vulnerable, legitimately so, to exactly the critique that Jimmy Dore is giving. I do think these are the neocons coming out and trying to still exercise some influence. I've been very impressed with how he's been working with Putin in terms of great power politics that we've been talking about in civilizationalism. To take a look at the video I did yesterday on the blow up in Srpska in Bosnia, possibly another area of a war erupting. I don't think it will, but it is another area where great power politics are going to have to, I think, resolve it in the end. I don't think the UN is going to be able to resolve it. Not with the president of Srpska kind of calling their bluff. So I just, in the end, he's leaving himself fully open to that critique, legitimately so. And I have to say I'm a bit sympathetic with it. I just don't think we should be involved in that area, to be honest with you. I think increasingly the Red Sea area is going to be under an Islamic hegemon, a civilizational Islam that can be very, very reasonable, that can be extremely profit-centered, like we're seeing in Riyadh and Dubai and United Arab Emirates and Qatar and Doha and so forth. They're very, very interested in becoming, their own version of Dubai, and will want to have the optimal conditions for investment and international trade and so forth. But the more we bomb there, the more we intervene, the more Trump, I think, betrays the promise he made during the campaign, and the more resentment we foment in an area that where they're already quite resentful to us. So there you go, R2. That's kind of my thing with that. Luke, have you heard about the sexual allegations against Robert Morris, the former spiritual advisor to Donald Trump? What are your thoughts on? I haven't, Luke. I haven't caught up on that. Let me just give it a quick look here. But I mean, I could give you my sense on these sexual allegations for, let's see. Sorry, my computer has been going real slow of late. Yeah, so this is a couple back. Non-disclosures. Yeah, these non-disclosures. Texas pastor indicted for child sex crimes. Yikes. Gateway Church scandal. I mean, there's a couple of things here. So sexual scandal is nothing new. I mean, what maybe the scandal side of it, because perhaps in the past it was ignored or what have you. But this is nothing new. It's part of the fallen human condition. Humans have I mean, we see it in the Bible, right? I mean, Genesis has a lot of sexual crimes in it throughout, for example. So sexual scandals are not new. What is new, it seems to me, is in the Protestant church, not excusing anything going on in the Catholic Church for sure. That was pretty horrific. That would the plague of pedophilia that we saw there, and the cover-ups involved and so on. Not making light of that, but in the Protestant world, because it's decentralized, because of a disestablishment, it does tend to take on a bit of a corporate culture, especially as it's been privatized. So, back in the day in urban planning, if you say, look in a medieval city or even a early New England, colonial commonwealth, the church was usually the most prominent building in the city. And then across from it was the castle, the royalty or town hall or whatever it was. In smaller towns, they were just merged, right? Think of Walnut Grove and with Little House on the Prairie, where they did school, they did town hall meetings, they did elections. It's all in the centrality of the church. The church was it was the Garden of Eden, the paradise restored in Christ in the town. But now in modern urban planning, the church has been completely expelled out of the public square. That's what secularism is. Secularism is a social strategy that enables the state to assume territorial monopoly over the public square, and it pushes out any and all peer competitors, as it were, like the church or even increasingly the family or community and so on. So it pushes the church into the periphery of social life, usually into the area of consumption. So you have a pizzeria, you got a dry cleaners, you got First Methodist. And just the problem there is it takes on a corporate culture. And within a corporate culture, you don't have the hierarchical structure to kind of keep all your pastors accountable for their sexuality. So in the Orthodox Church, and in the Catholic Church, the bishops are all celibate. The bishops are married to the church, so they're not supposed to get involved sexually with anyone, period. End of discussion. And then there's all kinds of safeguards to make sure that doesn't happen. So in the Catholic Church, they'll often live together in a fraternity-like structure, and same in the Orthodox Church and monasteries and the like. So there are safeguards against that. But whereas it seems to me in a privatized corporate-like social context, where pastors are allowed to be married and they're alone often with women all the time. That's one of the things Billy Graham did. He made a commitment never to be alone with a woman ever who was not his wife. But again, it was dependent entirely on him to enforce that. Maybe he could have created structures in the Billy Graham ministries to ensure that, to institutionalize that. But if you don't have those structures in place, anything can happen in the end. Bottom line, you're just reliant solely on your own integrity, and that can often be a demonic feeding ground. So a privatized, disestablished church, I think, is devoid of the safeguards against sexual scandals, and therefore I don't think we should be surprised that we see a lot of them, particularly in the American evangelical church. So that's kind of my sense of it. Deborah, do you think conservatives will win judges seat in Wisconsin April 1st? Heard opposition spending millions. Yeah, well, again, where are they getting it from, right? They're getting it from you. They're getting it from the USAID. I will be focusing on Wisconsin next week. It's just a little bit early, right? Right now, it's looking good. Right now, we're doing really well. Careful with polling. Polling doesn't tell you much. Wisconsin is probably the hardest state. Rich Barris always says this. Wisconsin is the hardest state to poll. So don't listen to polls. Look at the early voting. That's the trends you want to keep an eye on. So we'll be keeping track of it. But yeah, I'm really hoping the conservative pulls it off. Again, the important part is it doesn't mean anything. Okay, it doesn't mean anything ultimately in terms of the MAGA movement or anything like that. We want to see Democrats lose. That's the bottom line. I think it's a moral victory, as it were. Vlad the Impaler. So not long ago, getting a Tesla was the ultimate in lib virtue signaling. Amen, amen. Today, other libs are destroying them. Lib on lib political violence. Exactly right. And the same party that decries non-existent political violence from the right is utterly silent about this or cheering it on. The left is eating itself. Your thoughts? I think you're exactly right, SC. I think you're absolutely right. It's very much what I was talking about earlier. This is what Andrei Lobachevsky and Olavo de Carvalho concluded. So a political philosopher and a psychologist concluded about the left after studying them their entire adult life, that the left-wing core, the core of the modern political left, are basically overrun by psychopaths. So when those psychopaths command a sizable population around them, that population inevitably ends up hysterical. So they could be hysterical about the environment, and then everybody run out and buy a Tesla, or they can be hysterical about a Nazi who happened to have been building those Teslas, so now they're going to run around and start burning them. But regardless, there does seem to be, in that latter element, there does seem to be an inherent futility in the movement. The movement entails its own demise, in that's what I meant about the immolation, self-immolation. There's a self-destructive element to it, where in the name of protest, you actually end up destroying the protestor. And it's odd. I know it's strange, but I guess in a sense, I mean, it's very much like suicide bombing. In a sense, it's like, my hatred for you outweighs my love for myself. I think that's the message you're trying to say, or you're trying to rouse people to see you need to hate this more than you love your own life. Something akin to that. I think that's what gets played out. But there is a psychopathy behind it. These are psychopaths, and the left cannot continue. I don't know of any movement where the core is constituted by psychopaths that has any future. I mean, the Nazis. This would have been the same in the Nazis. Psychopaths were very, very attracted to the core of Nazism, and it fell apart. They were very attracted to the core of communism, and it fell apart. Now, again, they could cause a lot of damage in the process, but eventually, literally burns itself. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing with Tesla, or with the Tesla violence, the new TDS, as it were. Rock dog, Dr. Steve, with all the domestic terrorism going on with Tesla cars and dealerships, can't we just arrest Chucky Shoe Leather, Alex Occasional Cortex, Maxi Pad Waters, Leo Watha, etc.? All of these Democrats politicians who are calling for violence, for inciting riots and taking part in domestic terrorism. I would love, to be honest with you, being politicians, I think they're clever with their words. They know what they can say and get away with. I would like to see someone like Jimmy Kimmel at least brought in for some questioning. I would like the other night when he looked into the camera and said, "Whatever you do, don't burn a Tesla." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think ABC executives need to be called in and say and basically be told, "You get rid of that guy." Or the FCC is going to come down on you like you've never been come down before. I would hope. Again, we'll see. If anyone's going to fight for us, it's Trump. Bottom line. If anyone's going to fight for us, it's Elon. If anyone's going to fight for us, it's Pete Hegseth. They're going to do it. And that's why I still put a lot of trust in Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. I think if anyone's going to fight for us, it's them. So I think we'll see it. We'll see something. We'll see something. That's why in the end, turning to tyranny and terror is just ultimately, hopefully that'll just be the excuse to squash him. And I hope he does. I hope Trump crushes the far left. Politically, just to make sure. Marilyn Duggity, good to hear from you, my friend. Trump said he wants to join the UK Commonwealth monarchy. Trump said he wants to join the UK Commonwealth monarchy. Is Trump really serious about it? I'm worried We fought hard for our freedom. Is there any hope? Yes. I don't think you have to worry about that, Marilyn. I don't know. I didn't hear him say he wanted to join the monarchy. There is talk of an Anglosphere, but that's going to be more civilizationalist. It's not going to be a formal nation. An Anglosphere would be a civilizational state, with the core state being the United States, and then sort of a North American security structure, bringing in the British Isles, and then also would probably include Asiatic element there with Australia and New Zealand, but no, it wouldn't go beyond that. MAGA 20 forever. Dr. Steve, instead of impeaching judges, I thought of two alternatives. I figured the federal legislative had to be bloated like the rest of government, and found that there are 94 federal districts, but 677 federal judges. Couldn't the DOJ downsize the number of judges per district, or eliminate and consolidate whatever section of the district the woke judges in? Secondly, couldn't Trump offer generous pension packages for federal judges who retire? That's awesome, MAGA 24. I love how you're thinking. I think they're already on top of it. I do. As I understand it, they are. And they are strategizing of what they can do over the next several months to, shall we say, thin out the judiciary. Congress can also, as I understand, come in. They can, as I understand, they do, just by simple majority vote, have the power to reassign judges. So redistrictize them. So yeah, I think there's, so in other words, instead of having them in a district court in DC, they could put them in a like a podunk court, in some rural area. Yeah, so I know they're up to something, and we'll see how it rolls out. That's what I mean. In the end, the tyranny and the terrorism are just further loser strategies. And Michaelis, I hope I'm saying that right, Michaelis. President Trump has said he would prefer Carney as Canadian Prime Minister over Pierre Poilievre. I saw that. The Conservative leader. What clever political strategy do you see behind this? The only one that I could figure is he wanted Pierre Poilievre. So right now, Trump is not popular in Canada, right? We had Richard Syrett on. He's a talk radio host out of Ontario. And, he made it clear like 80% of Canadians right now really hate Trump. So the only thing I could see him saying is something like, I want the Liberal to win, because then I could slap him around all I want. So that will give Pierre Poilievre the talking point he needs to say, hey, if you want to vote against Trump, vote for me. That's the only one I could think of. I don't think Trump cares. I think he sees, and I'm with you. I've been a big fan of Pierre Poilievre. But I think Trump just sees Canada as being a hangover of the old liberal international order. And he wants and also having a China problem. And he wants Canada to get with the new civilizationalist order, join into a North American security sphere and prosperity sphere, and drop their tariffs. And let's just he wants totally free trade with Canada, and so as to combine our consumer market with their natural resources market, which is second to none. It's the wonder of the world in natural resources, and then be able to put American security forces up in the northern Arctic, along with Greenland, so as to control now those trade routes that are opening up, that right now Russia almost has like 100% control over, and are bringing in China to benefit from that, given Russia and China's new alliance. Thank you, Joe Biden, who guaranteed that. So that's the only one I could think of. I could just think of him trying to give Pierre Poilievre a little bit of a talking point, because Pierre is kind of blowing it. Pierre is trying to play it safe in Canadian politics, And I just noticed in modern day politics, playing it safe gets you crushed. So we'll see. We'll see. Absolutely. Rock Dog, Dr. Steve, judges can be removed by a simple majority in the Senate for violating their oath to protect the Constitution when it comes to these activists. Do you think anyone, do you see, will have the courage to do that? I don't know. And again, I'll have to check with that. As I understand, the only way a judge can be removed is a supermajority vote. But if it's just a simple majority, whatever Congress can do, whatever the Senate can do with a simple majority, they should try to do. I think Thune should try to do it. Right now, they're just playing. They're playing it seems to me they're deferring to this summer's decision, which isn't far away. We're just a few months away from it. This summer's decision from the Supreme Court, because I think they see that the Supreme Court is going to overturn these rulings. They are going to rule in. You can't rule in favor of executive immunity and not rule in favor of executive power. They're one and the same. But in the end, I just don't see them not overturning it. And I just think the Senate is just doing what the legislative branch has been doing best these last 2 to 3 decades. Which is just be complacent and just drink and do talk shows and podcasts. I mean, Gingrich really was, it seems to me, the last real parliamentarian. Really, and he and Bob Dole and the Contract with America was a masterclass in how to run for Republicans, in how to run the legislative branch. That was and Bill, I think it ended up strengthening the Bill Clinton presidency. So there you go. They just don't do anything anymore. William O'Toole, is the Democratic Party finally falling apart, disintegrating before our happy eyes? Or is this just a typical cycle in their infamous history? Example, in 1960 with JFK, the Democrats see him as the unifier of the party or an outsider because it seemed the Democrats were in a schism in the 60s. Yeah, the 60s obliterated the Democratic Party, at least again when it came to executive power. The 60s helped to usher in 2 terms of Nixon, with the second one being the single greatest landslide victory of any president in our nation's history. So it was a very clear mandate that we wanted a strong Republican executive in power. The politics were such that Democrats still had the majority because of the South in Congress, because of the South, but many of them were willing to work with Nixon because they were conservative Democrats. That all shifted with Reagan, of course, in 1980. So you had the coup. I do think that the removing of Nixon was part of a deep state coup, and not as horrible as what happened with Kennedy, of course, but almost, if you think it through, almost like 10 years to the time, right? They were getting rid of Nixon in 75 or so, 74, 75. Then Ford comes in just as a caretaker. There was a little bit of reprieve with Jimmy Carter, but then you had 3 elections in a row. And again, massive elections of 400 plus electoral votes for the Republican back to back to back in 80, 84, and 88. It was only with the rebranding of the Democratic Party with Bill Clinton in 92 as a centrist Democrat, the New Democrat, that they were able to get it back. And then again, Bush Jr. took it back for 2 years. Then Obama took it back for 2 years. But during Clinton's era, first Democrat in 12 years, and he's suddenly gotten to like the gays in the military and all that, raising taxes, and people got really nervous with him. So boom, the Congress switched to Republicans. So all of that's to say, I think that was all playing out from the absurd lunacy that we were seeing from the left, the divided left, kind of the Civil War left in the 60s. I think you're absolutely right. Are we seeing something similar? I would argue yes. And again, you're already seeing it with the progressive, pro-Palestinian progressives facing off with the pro-Israeli liberals. That's not going anywhere. As long as Bibi is bombing Gaza, that's going to continue to be a huge issue of division among the left. It cost the left votes, particularly in Hamtramck, Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan, with very, very large Muslim populations that are all Democrats, interestingly enough, but they turned around and endorsed Trump because they saw him as the person who could bring peace. So all of this is to say in the region and there. So all of this to say, yeah, I think the Democrats are in a huge, huge problem right now. I think they're in an 80-20 doom loop. I don't know if they can escape it, given that the core are all psychopathic lunatics. And I'm not saying that hyperbolically. I use the example of Andrei Lobachevsky and Olavo de Carvalho and scholars who have actually made this argument that psychopaths, those who are malevolently inclined to manipulating others, are drawn to political power structures that enable them to malevolently manipulate en masse. And right now, that is the Democrat Party. The Republican Party is too healthy, and just leftist politics in general is the politic of they are they're the most sociopathic, psychopathic, neurotic. That's the word I'm looking for. They're the most neurotic people on the planet. They're the party of the Karens and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that is absolutely destroying their party. Oh, sorry, William. Speaking of Reagan with the revelations of deep state CIA, State Department, FBI, is it beyond the realm to believe now Reagan never knew about the Iran arms deal, as he maintained? And do you feel the deep state did in Nixon along with Dems? Yes. And do you feel the deep state did in Nixon? Wow, look at that. So I just answered the earlier, the latter question. Yes, I do. I think it was. I mean, again, he was the most popular president we had ever seen in our nation's history. And within months, he was thrown out of office. And he was a scorn of the American people. This is when the CIA, via Operation Mockingbird, controlled a lot of the legacy media, as we saw happen right in front of our very eyes via the Twitter files. We saw how deep state, particularly the FBI in this case, through what's called sheep dipping, where they are supposedly discharged from their operations within the FBI, but then they go and they work for Facebook. And we know former FBI operatives all had their own Slack channel on Facebook. There were so many former intelligence officers, FBI employees and officers in Facebook, in Twitter. So we see how it works. It's in our three-letter agencies control much of the narrative, informational narrative that we get through direct channels or even directly occupying inside the legacy media. So that's why the legacy media all sounds the same. They all this is the way they've been operating since the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, since the deep state was formed in the late 30s. This is just how they operate. This is the magnificence about technopopulism, where now with internet-based technologies and the rise of the cybercosm, as it were, we're able to break free from that old liberal industrialized order. And there's really not much. Again, they tried to control it with social media, but they couldn't. And when Elon took over Twitter, that was it. It was done. Their monopoly was gone. He exposed it, and now they look hapless at this point. So yes, I do believe that the propaganda and the sting operation, all that sort of stuff around Nixon was deep state orchestrated. I don't know about. I have to. Yeah, obviously with Reagan, maybe. He was very much. He was very much part of the whole Iran-Contra sentiment. He wanted to support the freedom fighters in Nicaragua. Congress wouldn't let him, and so Ollie North and oh gosh, who were some of the others involved? Wow, you're taking me down memory lane. I remember I was a teenager back then. I was riveted actually by the hearings. That's when I discovered Ollie North. what was his name? Not Polkinghorne. I'm forgetting. Maybe somebody could put it in the chat. But yeah, that's when the argument was that they were a little overzealous and that they were doing what they could to try to enact the president's whims and sentiments, but without the president actually knowing and protecting him. And he was able to survive it. Yeah, but it could be that he did not know about the Iran-Contra arms deal. Rock Dog, Dr. Steve. So without the Department of Education, does that mean states will actually get more money? I believe so, Rock Dog. Yeah, it's certainly. I mean, we all now know the Department of Education was a slush fund. We all know that now, right? We saw it with USAID. We see how this works. It was a slush fund. At the very least, they throw in all this money into the Department of Education, and then the people who work there get to distribute that money in any way they see fit, and it's always to left-wing causes. So yes, states will end up getting more money for education, but again, I would underscore it's generally education is not about money or funding. It's about it's the structure of education. It's the teaching method, the pedagogy, the curriculum, the worldview. And if we have a classical education that all of our founding fathers had, all of that's taken care of. I've seen schools, I've worked for a school that just operated on a shoestring budget, but gave the best education in the state, bar none. So it's not so much about budget, but budget certainly can help in that. It can teach, it can pay teachers more. You can institute a merit system, pay system. You can get the best administrators and so on. So, and best schools, beautiful schools. You want your education institutions to be places of truth, goodness, and beauty, and actually embody it. So, yeah. Richard, Dr. Steve, your thoughts on the release of the JFK files? I knew I was going to get a question on that, Richard. I knew it. And so, to me, it's one of the most important events, obviously, in our nation's history. And it's just going to take a long time to go through all 80,000 pages. I read one stat, you could read like 400 pages a day, and it would still take you like a year and a half to go through, or something, or months to go through, And of course, I don't have time to do it. So I'm depending on others. And I'm just keeping abreast of it. But it's going to take some time to go through all those. And I don't want to give an opinion about it until it gets corroborated. And so I'll probably be a little bit late to the game in our videos on that issue, because I'm going to be reliant on when somebody says, hey, this is the bombshell, I don't want to use that. I want to wait for somebody else to come. He's right. That is a bombshell because we've seen this. I want corroboration there because I don't want to sensationalize something that's so important. Thus far, what we seem to be getting from what I can gather is apparently John Kennedy Jr. was it John Kennedy Jr. Referred to Joe Biden as a traitor. That was one. I don't know quite the all the things around that. Lee Harvey Oswald seemed to be a person of interest. That was the first kind of but long before he was accused of killing Kennedy. That was the first round of it. Then the second round of it is he wasn't a person of interest. He was actually being groomed by the CIA, possibly sheep dipped, like we talk about. His move to the Soviet Union, we were told, was for ideological purposes. No, it looks like it was more deep state purposes, because if it's ideological, you don't just come back, especially with like a Russian wife and stuff like that. So it looks like the deep state was far more involved in this. The whole Warren report is nonsense. I think it was just incredibly contaminated. I think we're seeing that in terms of particularly the actors that were involved. And it will be interesting to see what comes of it. I noticed, I read a little something with Ben Shapiro is sort of dismissing a lot of this, because the term conspiracy theory came out of this. That's when interestingly, the deep state started using this term conspiracy theory to denounce anybody who is skeptical of the conclusions of the Warren report. He's using that term as well, I've noticed, and he seems to be going with the standard Warren report narrative. It was a small piece that he wrote. I don't believe he read through the whole report or the whole the declassified files. And by the way, as I understand it, it's about 20% of them more that need to be classified. But people are combing through them, and we haven't seen. I don't think we've gotten any smoking gun as of yet. I don't know if we will. Remember, in the end, we're dependent on the deep state to give up documents of the deep state. It's just, it might be just too much of a tall order to ask. As far as I'm concerned, just dismantle the whole damn deep state while we can, which looks like what we're doing. And no smoking gun yet, but definitely a lot of suspicious connections are starting to get made with the deep state's activity, particularly the CIA's activity. Kevin, Dr. Steve, if we already have an idea about who's financing the creatures that are burning and harassing Tesla, etc., can't we follow the money and use it to charge the people financing it, LinkedIn and so forth, with domestic terrorism? The same could be said of the wealthy traders trying to crash Tesla stock. Interesting. You mean like Tim Walz? They're harming other investors in order to enrich themselves. I don't know about the latter one. I just don't have the legal, financial legal expertise on that. But yeah, as I understand it, Pam Bondi has affirmed that they are going after the money, the money sources, and seeing them as every bit as much as culpable in the acts of violence and terror as the perpetrators themselves. So that, but again, things take a little longer. And Trump is moving at such breakneck speed. It's weird to look at the judicial appellate process, and it's weird to look at even just the indictment process in the Department of Justice. And the investigative process in the FBI. That just takes longer. It's the nature of the beast. We got 4 years, guys. We just finished. What is it today? The 21st. We just finished the second month. It is that we're not even in the first 100 days yet. Past the first 100 days. So we're almost there, 30 more days or so. Well, not quite yet, 38 more days or so. So yeah, it's just going to take time when all's said and done. But it will happen. It looks like it. William O'Toole, Paul Ryan as Eddie Munster. Don't you think he looks more like Greg Brady? Because he's got that, what do you call it? The Dracula kind of look. Greg Brady, really? Maybe. No, man. No, I'm telling you, take a look at a picture of him. Think Eddie Munster, and you'll never be able to unsee it. I'm telling you. Janice Bauman, Dr. Steve, since impeachment of judges takes too long, which judicial groups President Trump can defund them? Yeah. Wouldn't that be faster? That's what I understand. So I talked about that the other day. As I understand it, they can be defunded, and they are going through what they need to do in the interim before the Supreme Court decides. Also, as a way to preempt if the Supreme Court were to go in the other direction, if suddenly Amy Coney Barrett or John Roberts decides not to vote with the conservative four. They want to have a backup plan as well. It's all going. It's all happening. So yeah, I think that would be certainly faster. Anything that could be done by executive or anything that could be done by the legislative branch with a majority vote, simple majority vote, will be much faster. Mitchell, thank you for the gift. A little nervous about the economy. Trump did not rule out a recession. What could be some major implications that we go into a recession? Yeah, it's going to, this plagued Reagan's first 2 years, hit him hard in the midterms. But as I heard it put, you can't shoot an arrow without pulling back on the bow. And what we're looking at right now is a little bit of a pullback in the activity. But inflation's going down, interest rates are going down, price of eggs going down, price of energy going down, massive investment coming in to the United States, particularly foreign investment. We're talking trillions upon trillions of dollars. Energy independence. Trump is setting up a massive economic flourishing to happen. It's inevitable. But there is pullback. I mean, you guys know I'm big into crypto, big into Bitcoin, and there's been massive pullback with that as well. But that's to be expected. It's going to shoot through the roof like we never imagined. But but in the meantime, the one thing that's holding Trump's poll numbers back, his poll numbers are excellent. I keep an eye on Mark Mitchell, Rasmussen, one of the single most accurate pollsters. I don't give a flip of what NBC says or CNN says. He gives he does the daily the daily presidential poll. He said Trump's been up over the last couple of days. He's up around 52% or so. It's very good. But what's keeping him back from like a 58%, maybe even a 60% approval is the economy. What if the economy? So the implication is he's just a little bit lower in the opinion polls that might hurt the Republicans a little bit. But right now they seem to be doing very well, setting up for the midterms. Very, very well. Looks like we're going to pick up 2 seats in the Senate, actually. And so we'll be at about 55. And the House looks pretty good as well. They may even be able to expand their majority. They're looking at about 26 seats where the Democrat incumbents are particularly vulnerable. But that's going to be the implication. The major implication is going to be the Republicans go into the midterms weaker if the economy doesn't recover sooner. We'll see. I thought I saw the Fed giving a recession only about a 4 or 5% chance. They weren't as concerned about recession. But Trump does believe a number of major things, major changes have to be made, particularly on trade and energy, that's going to take and the federal government, scaling back federal government, that is going to hit the economy a little bit in the transition process. That's all. He's just being realistic about it. So we'll just keep an eye on it. But as long as gas prices keep going down, as long as cost of living keeps going down, we should be okay. The consumer-based population should give Trump cautious optimism. But apart, for them just go 80% go, this economy is the greatest thing we ever seen. That happened for Reagan, but it took the first 4 years. It really did. First 2 years were rough. And then the final 2 years of his term, that's when things really started to boom, turn around, morning in America again, and he won 49 states. David, Dr. Steve, radical politics is floating the idea of nuking the filibuster in the Senate. Yeah, I know. I saw that. Jack's been talking about that. Hypocritical, given his praise to Joe Manchin for voting against the measure less than a few years ago. Your thoughts? I can't comment on that because I did not know he was praising Manchin for voting against it. What I've seen in his what I've seen is Jack's advocacy of getting rid of the filibuster, bringing it down to 52 or something like that. Because bottom line, Jack sees the Republicans having control of the Senate for the next generation. And he's not alone. Many polling analysts see that the Senate is permanently out of the hands of Democrats. And bottom line, it's simply because there's more red states than blue states when all is said and done. And a Democrat's and a senator wins a state. It's unlike a district for a representative. So they win a state. And if the state's red, you're going to have, generally speaking, two Republican senators. Again, generally speaking, we have yet to see that with Arizona. Nevada is a newly minted red state. We have yet to see that. Looks like Georgia, we're going to pick up a seat in Georgia. We may pick up a seat in New Hampshire that isn't turning increasingly red. So there's more red states than blue states. And for him, if they're not 60% of the country, if they're 55%, and it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future, get rid of it. He's just being very, politics is power. Get rid of it. Get rid of the darn thing, and let's just go ahead and let's unleash the power of the legislature, because it seems to be held back. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, that's his argument. I tend to be, if you don't know, I tend to be very politically agnostic in many ways. I'm obviously MAGA through and through, but MAGA is more of a driving force behind politics, and then the politics is the lagging indicator, the primary, the leading indicator is the MAGA movement. It's the populist political realignment away from horizontal, left and right, to vertical people versus the permanent political class. It's globalism shifting over into civilizationalism. How it works out politically, for me is secondary. So Jack is making it. Maybe we can bring Jack on and we can do a Q&A with him on Monday night and just kind of get his reasoning for it. So yeah, I mean, I'm not that big on political consistency per se. If he applauded Manchin for keeping it in order to hold back the insanity of the Democrats, but then wants to get rid of it in order to unleash the power of MAGA, I'm fine with that. I don't, because in the end, he's deferring to how to use power politically. And then the response is, but then that'll enable the Democrats. Democrats are going to do whatever the heck they want to do. There's just no, Democrats are going to be Democrats. They're insane. You can't be held hostage by lunatics in that sense. But we'll see. Maybe we'll have Jack on. Jack's a good friend of the channel, so we can bring him back. Great question, though, David. A very, very insightful. Rockcorp, Dr. Turley, did France really say they wanted the Statue of Liberty back? I guess so. I know it seems almost absurd, right? And Caroline Levitt had a great response. Well, we'll give you the Statue of Liberty back if you give us all the land that we liberated when we fought on your behalf back. Yeah, something like that. So I don't know. It's absurd. Brian, my friend. Hi, Dr. Steve. Dr. Brian here. And yes, I'm enjoying the best life in sunny Florida. That is so awesome. You rub it in here. I'm still in our Philly area. I do love the Philly area. I always will. But I was down there. You probably saw I was down in Key West a few weeks back. The Missus and I went down there for a lovely, beautiful several days. And I already miss it. All right. Given Justice Roberts and Barrett's softness and presidential power via their last ruling. All right. I'm going to take issue with you on that. Well, but let me see. What is your confidence that Scott Hood will strike down these judicial activist rulings? All right. So as I understand it, Brian, the Roberts-Barrett ruling was procedural, not merit. And again, so this is my namesake, Jonathan Turley. That was his big thing with this. He said, guys, I know it's frustrating because he thinks he's more libertarian. He thinks these judges are insane. Totally violating separation of powers. But he said in the end, Roberts and Barrett ruled that that were they to make that decision at that moment, they would have circumvented the appellate process. And the four conservatives like, yeah, because these judges are acting absurdly. Barrett and Roberts said that is for the process to work out. We are here at the end of process. They are very procedural. They've done it before. The four conservative justices just like to call out BS for what it is, and they're not slaves to the process, as it were. whereas Barrett and Roberts appear to be very, very devoted to the process so as to not make the court look political. The four conservatives don't care about the court looking political. I mean, they obviously share more with us. Certainly Thomas does, and Alito. They're Gorsuch too. Gorsuch has been phenomenal. Kavanaugh was wishy-washy for a while, but have you noticed Kavanaugh has been pretty solidly conservative ever since, I guess, the woke stopped harassing him at his house. So it was purely a procedural vote. When we look at the merits of it, the preceding, the closest decision they've made to something like this would be presidential immunity. Does the executive branch have its own? Is the executive branch accountable solely to a singular measure of accountability? Yes. Where is it? Legislative branch, not judicial. Judicial cannot interrupt in executive branch. You have to go via the legislative and only through impeachment. And if the legislature impeaches you in the House of Representatives and then convicts you in the Senate, then you're gone. Then that is how a president is held accountable. Other than that, a judge cannot hold a president liable for anything, as I understand. And that's why, in a sense, all the cases just basically collapse while he's using his duly elected, constitutionally derived executive powers. That is his immunity. And so when all these judges are imposing all of these injunctions, it just seems like the using the same rationale, the Supreme Court's going to come down and say, you can't do that. You can't interfere in his national security measures. You can't interfere in his executive branch hirings and firings. You can't interfere, blah, blah, blah. It sounds to me that's where they're going to go. Now, the legislative branch could come in, pass laws and say, nope, you can't do that. We're going to restore the Department of Education. We're going to restore all that sort of stuff. And then it's theirs. Then it's all part of the legislative branch. But you can't mess with the sort of the wall of separation, we might say, that the executive branch has given its constitutional powers. So the closest thing that they've ruled thus far on has been his immunity. And we got, if I recall, it was a 6-3 decision. So we should be okay with it. That's what gives me the confidence, is they have already given a ruling that's very close to this one. Sneaky vampire. Joe and Jill went up the hill to steal the POTUS station. Joe fell down and lost the crown, and Trump reclaimed our nation. Sneaky vampire. I should have paid you the $10 for that. That was brilliant. Love it. Joe and Jill. I love it. Mystic Tom. When will the criminals be arrested for the Arizona voter fraud? Yeah. Well, I mean, Katie Hobbs is going through her own issues right now. We'll see. I mean, she's coming, right? She's got to get reelected in 2026. So if you run a viable candidate there, that might even be one of the planks platforms he could run on. I mean, the Republican Party took a little bit of a setback in Arizona in 2020 and 2022. I mean, rightly so. I mean, your former governor Ducey was a jerk. I'll just say that. He was a rhino jerk on par with the lieutenant governor in Georgia, who got booted out, of course, because he was so ridiculously anti-Trump. Talk about TDS. Now he's on MSNBC, for heaven's sakes, as a commentator. So, or CNN, one of them. So they got a setback, and then 2024, the Republican Party came alive again in Arizona. I mean, you're still suffering for your McCainism. The McCainites took over the party. The neocons, Bushites took over the party. And it's becoming MAGA through and through. Kerry couldn't quite be the leader we were hoping she could be. So hopefully you're going to find somebody who's going to be able now to exploit the massive Republican voter registration advantage you have now in Arizona. Arizona is a thoroughly red. I mean, Maricopa County, what is it now? +7, I think, +7 Republican right now. It's insane. He who wins Maricopa wins Arizona. They've even Democrats have been falling in Pima now. Every single month, I'm seeing their margin just getting sliced down in Pima. So and then all the other counties are so deep red. So you should be able to take out Hobbs and perhaps get to the bottom of the insanity of what happened, and particularly in 2020 and 2022. Janine, thank you, Janine. Thank you for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Rockcorp, Dr. Turley, one of two. I posted similar before. Sorry for being a broken record. Would you believe me if I said the Democrat Civil War looks like the French Revolution? Estimate versus radicals fighting each other inside, while external powers tried attacking from the outside, eventually leading to 20 years of Napoleon and the collapse of the Holy Roman Empire. I'll expect something similar to happen. A Napoleonic Democrat to rise, and will be someone we're not expecting. Maybe 2 of 2. With again, I just a comment there. Maybe, but to me, Napoleon wasn't part of the revolution. It was actually trying to sort of restore. I see Trump almost like as the Napoleon figure in many ways, reasserting executive power. So anyway, all right, we'll keep going. With, I think 70% of Democrats wanting to fight against Trump. AOC seems to be leading the charge. For as much as we make fun of AOC dethroning Chuck Schumer, she still beat the second most powerful Democrat in the House to get there. She did. But in her district, keep in mind. And as dumb as she appears, she just might be the most influential and therefore powerful Democrat right now. Possibly. I mean, that's a sad state of the party. Because remember, half the party does not like her, the leaders. But they'll bow to her if she accumulates a tremendous amount of power. We'll see. She just comes across as just so whiny and, illiterate. She comes across as very dumb to even Democrats. Bill Maher thinks she's an idiot. She said this to Don Lemon. Nobody likes AOC. So, well, but you're right. I mean, they said the same things about Trump. They said Trump was a clown and blah, blah, blah. And so you're right. Yeah, there might be something there. We'll keep an eye on it. I mean, the media loves her. They adore her. She's probably some kind of Manchurian candidate in some way, shape, or form. But anyway. Good, very good observations. Dan the Man was the woman in the Tesla article really stupid enough to open the window and speak to some of the camouflage in the mask? It's the very first thing I had. I rolled down my window. I said, "What's the problem, sir?" It's like, dude, if you have somebody with a camouflage and a mask, I'm going around them, and I'm finding the next, police station to pull into. All right, I'm calling 911 from my phone. I'm being followed by some lunatic. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. She's actually very lucky. Very, very naive. Very dumb thing to do. Ladies, do not do that. Rectod, Dr. Steve, leftods. Getting rid of Tesla is calling Elon a Nazi, then buying a Volkswagen. I don't even need to read the rest of that. Oh, my gosh. Rock dog. And then buying a Volkswagen, a car company that was created by the Nazis, is proof that they have a lower IQ than an amoeba. Am I missing anything? No, they're lunatics. They are lunatics. They are. I mean, objectively speaking, they are psychopaths. So that's true. That's true. That's reality is irony. MAGA 24-hour Dr. Steve, shouldn't these psychos who are attacking Tesla dealerships and owners not be called domestic terrorists, but domestic terrorists, since their actions are so stupid? Probably. And yeah, and again, most of these people are going to get caught. I mean, it's not hard. You can find them in their phones. I mean, they can track the phone and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think they're pretty stupid, and they're going to find out very quickly that being thrown into prison for 20 years ain't fun. Mr. M, I was one who asked about populist delusion. How do I ask more questions without needing super chats again? Because I have a lot more. All right, Mr. M, I'm glad you asked the question. Hey, Micah or Josh, can you put up there you go. You go to fight.turleytalks.com/join. Just join our Courageous Conservative Club. And for one very modest fee every month, you get to ask me as many questions as you want. We on Monday nights, as you know, we have our private Q&A. You can ask me anything and as many questions you want. Every week, any week, you name it. So go ahead to fight.turleytalks.com/join. And that's how you can ask me. I mean, like you said, just pay one price and you don't have to worry about super chats ever again. Thanks, my friend. Stephen Click, Elon said in Joe Rogan cast that if he cut all the corruption money, that they would kill him. These people are psychos and traitors to no end. They are. They're psychopaths. Psychopaths whip up their audience into a frenzy and into hysteria. And that's precisely why I think you see violence so often on the left. Brenton, Dr. Steve, are there any law schools outside the Ivy League which produce quality attorneys and judges? I see the Ivy League law schools have a monopoly on the Supreme Court. Yeah, Regent University is excellent. It actually started as a law school. It's Christian conservative. They're very good. I don't know if Hillsdale has a law school, but there are. You could look that up. I mean, just like, good conservative law schools that aren't insane or crazy, but most of them are left wing. My daughter goes to Northwestern, and most of them are just they brought out what's her name, Latina. Why am I forgetting the Latina's Supreme Court justice? But they brought her out. Sotomayor. They brought her out to speak. Of course, it's never Judge Thomas. It's never Sam Alito. So I think Notre Dame too is pretty good. Quark Bender. Good afternoon, Dr. Steve. Trump wants to take over Ukraine's nuclear plants. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, I have not. I've not caught up with that one. I know what he wants their minerals. He wants the minerals around the sort of DMZ there, the front lines of Ukraine, front lines of Russia have. That's exactly where the mineral deposits are. That's what he wants. I don't know about the nuclear plants. So I can't comment. ROT, Dr. Turley, thank you for the LLC advice. Good from last week. Now I'm considering entering a bodybuilding competition later this year as a health nut. And the infamous Turley-nator, any advice you could share here too legally? Nothing too crazy, though. I'm not Dorian Yates after all. Yeah, dude. It's so funny because when I was younger, I loved freaking bodybuilding. So I discovered Arnold through Pumpin' Iron, the documentary in the 70s, Lou Ferrigno. Right. What is it? Columbu. Gosh, all these names coming back. And of course, Ronnie Coleman today. Well, I guess he's just retired now. He was pretty big 10 years ago or so. No, I don't have any advice there, my friend. I really don't. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one advice is find a mentor. Find somebody who has done what you want to do, and then have them train you with that. That's definitely what you want. Don't try to do it on your own. Always find somebody there. And you want a kind of apprenticeship like relationship. That's cool, Rotcore. I didn't know you were into bodybuilding. Dang. Yeah, I haven't lifted in a while. Dang, I used to be really into it. Yeah. Fell off the wayside with it. Quark Bender, after rebuffing U.S. President Trump's request to absorb Palestinian civilians from Gaza, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has said he's willing to temporarily absorb 500,000 Gazans. Wow, according to the Lebanese Al-Akhbar newspaper. Thoughts? Wow, well, that would be a game changer because Egypt, Jordan, they have not been hospitable to taking in. They didn't want a refugee crisis any more than we would want one, right? So who can blame them? It could be a game changer. We'll have to see. Like I said, Gaza is such a mess. It's an infrastructure, ideological mess, and both. It's a mess in terms of the actual structural integrity of the region, and it's a mess ideologically with Hamas. So how do you solve it? I thought Trump's plan to solve it was pretty impressive, but I don't know if it's doable. Again, you need people to cooperate with it. But that would be one of the geopolitical figures within this larger cooperation. So we'll have to see. It's a start. Zen, is there a way to make it harder to overturn an EO? I don't think so. It has to be legislated. I don't think so. It's part of the power of the office. The power of the office is EOs living by them and also dying by them. That's just the power of the office. Again, Trump is showing the executive power is incredibly powerful. We do have a kind of imperial presidency, but it is limited to that tenure. It's limited to the term, and it can be reversed just as easily. And Congress could push back against it too, but they're not, because Congress is so dysfunctional at this point. But no, I don't think you can. And with that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Make sure to stick around, watch all the stuff we've got on the channel. Some amazing stuff this weekend, as always. And then until then, I will see you on Monday. God bless. Have a beautiful weekend.